Good morning, everyone. Before we jump into any kind of analysis, I just want to point at the risk disclaimer at the bottom of the window. Trading futures is risky. It's not suitable for everyone. Everyone should make their own financial decisions. Anything that you see on the stream is just considered educational advice. It is not considered financial advice whatsoever. Also, you should note that the stream is about 8 to 12 seconds, variably behind actual live real time when you're watching. So if you're seeing something happen on screen, that has already happened in real life. So with those things out of the way, happy Friday. We're looking at a Friday session after a decent push up to the edge of value on the Nasdaq yesterday. In fact, if we look at a higher time frame, we can see that we've kind of created this double distribution this week in the volume profile. We rallied yesterday all the way almost to the tick of the upper side of value before getting pushed down in the other direction. We pulled back a little bit in the overnight, held some of these tops back from July 7th, and really kind of this interesting little high volume node that is sitting kind of in the middle of the double distribution. So, a fully quote clean or like a perfect double distribution wouldn't have this here in the middle. So that creates kind of an interesting wrinkle, another little layer of support in between the double distribution. So, sometimes people like to fade the edges, especially on a double distribution, because then if you start to come back down from the other side, your lower target would be somewhere probably just below we'll call it like a secondary point of control. But that gets a little messier when you have this little extra piece of volume here. It's just one other place that buyers can hold on the way down. I would like to see the areas that I'm looking at is potentially if we get any type of aggressive buying above this level. Um, if we can get through the weekly high, I would be looking at somewhere closer to a push up towards last week's edge of value. Right now, we're sitting about 400 or 500 points away from that, so hard to know what kind of momentum buyers are going to bring to the table. So that's kind of what I'm looking at on a higher time frame. The overnight session wasn't super duper exciting. It's not very often right now that I actually have to expand um, my price scale so that I can actually look at stuff properly because we've been so rangy. We have a concentration of some larger imbalances, some buy imbalances right here in the middle that we're kind of pushing away from right here at the open. We had a little bit of exhaustion up around 29,950 that we sold off from, put in a little bit of seller exhaustion on a pop, and then sold the rest of the way down to 29,717. So right now, nothing I would say super exciting, pretty flat profile in the overnight, highest concentration of volume. Technically, the point of control is sitting at 29,860-ish, but there's just a bunch of sort of like big orders that stick out here. So while it's doing whatever it's doing right now, testing this zone here, let's take a look at yesterday's session and where this ended up holding in the overnight. So yesterday's session had a nice rally in the morning, and then I don't know if it was a news sell-off or what drove it, but there was a pretty violent sell-off from about 9 a.m. to 9:30. It didn't last very long, and buyers absolutely put their foot in the sand and said, no, no longer are we going any lower. Got below the opening range low, and when they rebid that, it was off to new highs. So now we're just kind of trading inside of yesterday's range. So for me, it's very much a wait and see game to see, do buyers have any steam left after their rally from yesterday? Do we get continuation? Or do we just kind of continue this sort of like grind inside of the upper side of balance here on NQ? Personally, I really hate trading inside of balance and chop, and so I would love to see a directional move to the upside, just because I think it's a little bit cleaner. Um, if we go down again, it just we're just inside of, the last few weeks of balance. So it gets really messy, and a lot of times I think the reason people don't like to trade inside of balance is because it just starts to get non-directional. Your levels start to get messy. You kind of don't know where it's going to hold. Um, and yet at the same time, this area very much becomes a magnet. I mean, we have 1, 2, 3 weeks of point of controls that are all sitting within, call it 200 to 300 points of each other. So it's basically sitting right where all of the concentration of that volume is right now. So buyers still have work to do if they want to get it higher. So for me, going to be a little bit of watch and see. Also, I streamed on Wednesday of this week, and if you happen to catch that stream, it was a very, very, very choppy morning session. We actually did B period inside of A period, just meaning that they didn't break the opening range, the 30-minute opening range before 9:30, or in my case, before 9:30 my time. And we got a little bit of a scalp, um, and then it actually got a little bit directional after I was already off stream. And then I was out of office yesterday, wasn't in front of the screens, and we got just way nicer rotations. I was very jealous of anybody who got to trade yesterday's price action versus me trading Wednesday's price action, but that's just kind of how it turns out sometime. And after we moved around a lot yesterday, buyers did good work to kind of cross the entirety of balance. Um, I don't know if I have a ton of conviction that they're going to still have the steam today, but I would give them the edge. They're the closest to this side of value. They crossed the whole range. We put in a higher low overnight. Um, Kind of the ball is theirs to drop. Um, I did, I'm not somebody to pretend when I make trading mistakes. I was doing some coding in the overnight session, and happened to have this up. And as we've talked about, like for me, to, I don't have my DOM scrolled unless it's like to a place that I'm interested in interacting with, because I think it makes you push buttons. And I kept watching price hold this level in the overnight, and I was like, I'm gonna take a stab at this. And I must have punched in, I think, here after watching them test an imbalance, and um, I clicked, and I mean, I swear, as soon as I clicked, it shot up like 60 points against me. Just trading the micros, so it wasn't, not doing epic financial damage, but it was faster than I could get a stop in place, which I was not expecting from the overnight. I just happened to get filled right around the time that some kind of news or some other spike happened, and just had to punch out of it. But it happens to the best of us. If you can have a stop in place, in that case, had I put my stop in place, it would have been a buy stop, and I would have been long before I probably even got filled on my short. So it happens from time to time. No matter how experienced you are, um, the market can give you little surprises, and you just have to be ready to adapt when those things happen. Don't ask questions, just find a flatten button and get out. Um, so hopefully we avoid that today. Your delta thresholds control just how intense the candle coloring is allowed to get. So with higher thresholds, you'll see a tighter amount of coloring. So you end up only, excuse me, starting to see brighter colors near the bottoms of moves, like wherever it's the most intense, and you'll end up with a lot more faded colors. For the most part, if you're still learning, that's not a setting that we typically advise people to adjust. You can. Obviously, we've built these studies to have flexibility to do kind of whatever you want. So if you feel like experimenting, but typically that's a setting that I just kind of leave alone. So if we decide to pull back, um, the other side of this high volume node in the middle, this little guy right here is kind of what I'm interested in seeing if we pull back, if we hold, is like 29,645, which is going to be like kind of down where this imbalance from yesterday is. Um, but these big orders in the middle from the overnight session um, might be a bit of a magnet, which would help my dip buying thesis should we come down below the overnight low. So um, that's probably the first thing that I'm kind of looking for. I'm just going to change my tick interval on my volume profile. That's why it's so spiky, and I don't really need it to actually be that spiky. I'm just looking for like overall shape there, not for actual like full large orders there. Seller's getting real aggressive about 10 minutes in. There's just traffic in the middle though. Like I think these large deltas will probably provide, they might be a little bit of resistance underneath them. I got a big buy order coming in there. Um, they might also just, from the overnight session, we might just ignore them. Just kind of cut through them on the way down there. If we change delta threshold, which I can do on the stream real quick, if I change it to like say like 1,000, yeah, it's mostly just going to affect color. Changing your moving average will change your signal locations, but the threshold is really just color intensity. There's a little bit of exhaustion from the sellers in that sell-off and right back up into the traffic in the balance area. Just trading in the middle. And this is just a lot of traffic from the overnight. I don't have any interest in touching this in here. And I mean, yesterday was effectively kind of what I would call just kind of a messy trend day. Just got a really nice V. Um, but like once it put in its low, we just trended up the whole day, and closed pretty close to the daily high. Um, so it's a lot of price movement yesterday. So sometimes the market needs a day to digest it. So just keeping that in mind, that sometimes I look at the session from yesterday that I wanted to be trading and I want it to move around that much. And sometimes that doesn't always play out that way. I'll have to start streaming on off days to see if I can get myself out of balance purgatory. if we do if we do B inside of A period again today, I'm gonna be really upset. Um, can I please have it move around a little bit? Buyers pushing it back up, but on lighter volume and aggression than the sellers sent it down on, which is why our candle coloring hasn't rolled over from the sell color, even though it's going up. I'll also show that we're working on some upgrades for our impact study, which I can show right now since we're just trading in the middle and I'm not taking any trades before the 30-minute opening range gets set. So our impact study, which if you're trading with this right now, you won't see these settings because this is still in development. But we are working to break up our RTH and ETH levels so you can control them and show them or not show them independently. Um, we found that in looking at some code yesterday, one of our members flagged um, that she wasn't seeing some levels that she thought should be popping up. And when we looked closer, some of the weighting from the overnight session was overriding things later in the session. So larger imbalances weren't able to show up. So we've adjusted that code, and that's what we're testing with here live today. That's the benefit of getting to be a developer is driving the new whatever, but at the same time also knowing that if there's any bugs that we try to catch before they go out to our users, that I get exposed to those while I'm trading. So I'm actually going to use this new feature to turn off the overnight levels because they're really just here in the middle. They're not really providing me any extra information. They're just cluttering my chart. So the two levels that we see here, the dotted lines from the same impact study are large buy-in balances that have happened since the RTH open. So if you're watching, appreciate our member that called that out yesterday. That's how we make things better. There's no such thing as perfect software, but it gets closer to being perfect when we have people who observe things and call them out so that we can make stuff better. Nice move off that lower. They put in the zone here and put in some exhaustion. Buyer's going to try to get back to the RTH high. Also, I glanced and didn't see any data that's getting dropped at 9 Central, um, but it was a quick glance, so don't hold me to that. But I still am usually quite careful around the rollover at 9 a.m. Price usually likes to accelerate and move around on that half-hour turnaround. So once we get past 9 a.m., that's when or at least 9 a.m. Central, that's when I kind of start looking for trades. Once we've kind of established, what's going on, I get a little bit of a picture of how fast we're moving around. If we're trying to hold in range, are we trying to trend? Are we just trying to chop? Which is kind of what it looks like right now. But still on the few times that I've traded before the opening range is set, which is pretty rare, um, I typically, if price is anywhere near me before 9 a.m., I usually flatten out and then just get back in position later if I want to. But um, I don't like being part of whipsaws. And I find that even if there isn't data, that sometimes that 9 a.m. rollover brings in a bunch of different algorithms and buying that spikes price around a whole bunch before it decides what it wants to do. Gonna try to get a new RTH high here. I mean, if buyers could close this week, we got a long session to go. If they could close this week up above the edge of this week's value, that would be, I think, productive for more upside going into next week. Um, especially if you can get it above the weekly high, then you're kind of like taking out, a pretty distinct pivot swing high, and closing above 30,000. I think also just as a sort of large whole psychological number would be good for the buyers. Um, I mean, you can see on the volume profile for the week that like there really wasn't a lot of interest in going lower. You see the taper in the volume profile. But always the danger with the double distribution is that if we start to get momentum to the downside, that the lower end of this starts to become a bit of a magnet, but pretty far away from that right now. So and that was a new RTH high. The little bubble at the top is from our phantom study. So price made a new high, but on negative delta. And so it flags that as a weak or potentially false breakout, and you see a pullback from it pretty shortly thereafter. Let me take a look at, as I've said before, I don't particularly watch stocks for, trying to sort of anticipate market movement, but looking at the top holdings in the S&P typically will give me an idea of like what is kind of what's moving around, moving price around. So of the mega caps, Meta is up almost 6%, and Nvidia is up 1.5%. Those two alone are going to be responsible for keeping the Nasdaq up right now. After that, it's a bunch of flat Dow stuff, and then we have Intel that is down 3% and Google that's down almost 1%. So, the volatility in chips continues. The swings over there are pretty incredible. Interestingly enough, Nvidia is up, but Intel is down. And I'm trying to see where AMD is at this morning because that's been another one that has been incredibly volatile, though it's not as heavily weighted in the indexes. So AMD is up about the same as Nvidia, about 1.5%. So a little bit of a mixed bag. Some bigger names in tech holding things up in terms of holding price up, not holding it back. So we got another buy imbalance here, this time right near the new RTH high that they just made. You can see that correlate with the this little volume profile. Might be hard to see, but it basically lines up exactly where there's a little notch in there. And if we go look at price, we can see here's a 269 positive delta right there at 29,960. Buyer's only about 30 to 40 points away from the previous day's high. That would be their first price level to get above and try and hold. They just took out the overnight high on that last push. So right now, if you took this exhaustion signal or this zone print down here, you've already got yourself a nice 120 point winner on if you're still holding. Most of our studies are built and based around and developed by just observing what the market does. Um, I built a study probably now like 7 or 8 years ago. I think it was actually before I even really started trading futures, and built it during right before the pandemic or right during the pandemic. So like 6-ish years ago. It was way, way before anything Scalper IQ related, and was basically noticing that really aggressive um, and fast candles with one-sided buying or selling, um, like on tick charts. I started writing some studies to sort of flag those particular candles. And what I found was that the market really liked to revisit those areas and then use them as support or resistance. And then started noticing from time to time that some of those extreme candles um, would actually call tops and bottoms. Um, and so early on, I was writing and developing studies that were, um, experimenting with, extremes in order flow, even though I probably wouldn't have called it that at that point. Um, so whenever we started development last year, some of those ideas and those observations from actually trading futures myself, um, trading stocks and options and pretty much any other financial instrument I could get my hands on until I finally settled on futures. Um, and just kind of looking at those, starting to put some code to some ideas, starting to see how futures reacted to them. And that's kind of where, you know, studies studies come from in general, um, is, I think good good studies come from observation, um, noticing what the behavior for actual participants is doing, and then putting some code to it to see if you can make it, repeatable and useful. I think the exhaustion study is a really good example of that development process. Um, I had spent a lot of time looking at extremes for candles, but like the problem is that single extremes are not always indicative of direction. You can have extremes at the top as we break a new high, and then it can reverse off of that, or it can be a really strong breakout and be continuation. So while it's information that there's an extreme happening there, it doesn't necessarily have a directional quality to it. So whenever we started developing our exhaustion markers, um, at first I was really struggling to get something that did what I wanted to see and reproduce, like, watching a really strong move down and then watching, um, sellers or buyers sort of fumble the ball. And what we found was that exhaustion is really made up of two pieces, right? Like it's made up of an exhaustion, like a one-sided directional push to the upside or the downside. And then the piece that we were missing was we also need to be able to detect when that extreme move is over. And so the cool down period or the point at which whichever side is pushing the aggression sort of drops the ball is just as important to detect as the extreme in the first place. So when you see our exhaustion markers fire, it's looked for a certain number of bars that are extreme in one direction, and then it's flagging whenever that extreme is over. It's not always going to pick um, perfect lows, because sometimes you do get, like, in an exhaustive move, you get a push down, you get a little bit of a relief bounce, and then you get more continuation. But there's no way to be able um, to discern whether, good exhaustion for a bounce or bad exhaustion for a bounce. If we knew that, we would have a money printer, which we do not. So we flag them. It gives you the extra information. If there's other things um, around them, support, resistance, other market information that corresponds with that, or the risk to reward is just good and you want to take that trade, then you have the option to do so. But that's kind of a little bit of insight into how we code some of these studies, and um, most of the time they come from observations that we see in the actual market. and then putting code to them, not the other way around. We're just about to set the 30-minute opening range. Let's see if that brings in any more volatility, because not very rangy so far. Well, that was the wall clock rollover. They just heard me talk about how volatile it gets at that wall clock rollover, so they're not going to do it this time. Just gonna kind of sit here. Just hugging the edge of RTH value for the session. And they basically held the very top tick is basically the edge of the weekly value. Here come some buyers. Getting above the previous day's close and the Globex open is what it just pushed back above. This imbalance here at 29,960, which is getting flagged by the impact study, is probably going to be a bit of a magnet when it's this close, in my opinion. I love that I flagged. I was like, oh, typically gets more volatile at 9 a.m. Proceeds to put in a 15-point range. We have slowed down a lot, though, in comparison to the range that we got yesterday and we saw even earlier in the week. I think a lot of that was headline driven by stuff in the Middle East, but the market seems to have digested that. Going to come up and test that imbalance level there. First test of it was a sell. Not really too interested in fading anything from the short side up here unless we get a really good setup. I just think that, bulls have basically pushed it all the way through the week. So I think the onus is on them to defend price up here. And if they can't defend price, then we'll see what that looks like. But I think this is going to be a hard short right now. We're also not moving around that much. If we were a little bit more rangy and had a little bit more volatility, then it might be a little easier to scalp quick pullbacks. But when we're kind of just grinding and chopping, I think the chance of getting short somewhere up here and getting stuck while it rotates around me is pretty high. Nice pullback off that level, though. You got about 30 points if you were selling right at it. Man, a super fun session yesterday while I was not around, and back to the daily grind here. Even though it's boring, I will say that the same thing I said at the beginning of the stream, which is that if buyers can hold this up towards this edge of the range for most of the session, especially if we can close outside of this week's value, I think that's pretty productive for more upside going into next week. The risk for the buyers is the double distribution setup for this current week. So if there's any type of profit taking later in the session, or we start to get any type of sell momentum, falling back through the range is a possibility, though I don't see it that much volatility right now, and that would be a pretty big move. So unless there's some type of news cycle or something like that, some type of news that comes out that can send us lower, it seems that the pattern we've seen for most of this year, particularly with the conflict in Iran, is that on Fridays we seem to be see the start of more military action if there is going to be any. I think the U.S. government has basically said that they are doing that to reduce volatility in the markets. But you have to think that, if there's any type of, like, if it keeps happening every week, right? Like the market sort of gets wise to that. So if there's any hint of that in the air right now, I haven't been reading the actual news cycle, but seeing some late session selling pressure wouldn't really surprise me if anybody wants to sort of de-risk as we go into another weekend, which seems to have been the timing for more military action, which is what drove a lot of the volatility earlier in the week. We saw spikes in oil, and of course, equities and futures moved lower um, in response to that. Sellers trying to do something here. It's pretty weak for the moment. Um, Sitting right at the edge of. There's a nice little buy there. There's a little buy imbalance right there. It's just the range is so tight. Well, whoever bought that was a little early. And they're gonna get it back above that level. I don't love this here though for like a dip buy. It's like right at yesterday's close and right at Globex open, and from a risk to reward perspective, only now like 30-ish points off the high. If that had happened a little bit lower, if that had happened closer to 880, I might have been a bit more interested in that, but it was just getting super choppy in here without a lot of momentum. There's going to ping pong between these two imbalances now. And from imbalance to imbalance. So a big 100 contract order get filled there. And getting rejected off of it again. That makes it look good for our imbalance study, but it's not ultra tradable for me. That's another big buy imbalance. Buyers starting to get a little more aggressive up here, starting to throw some size around. And this one's at probably right at 47-ish. It's this 109 here. Starting to get pretty choppy up here. I mean, sellers aren't able to push it back, but we aren't moving either. One of the things I always think about before I get into a trade is if I've been watching, like, say, like a bunch of choppy price action, I always kind of think to myself, would I be frustrated if I was sitting in position right now? And if the answer is yes, that means I probably shouldn't be clicking buttons. Because right now, I would be like, if I was long, I would be like, why aren't you breaking the high? Let's go. I'm going to get the opening range high. They're going to try. Missed it again. It's not particularly what I want to see from the buyers. They do need to keep up the aggression and momentum if they want to see higher into the end of the week. And Phantom flagged that as that candle's high, trying to make a high on negative delta, which it pulled back from. You're just getting a cluster of like way too much market information in this tight area. Like the longer it sits here, I think the longer it becomes a coin flip as to whether we're gonna get a pop through the high or we're gonna get a little bit of a pullback from it. This is kind of what I flagged at the beginning of the stream. Just we had a couple of V-shaped recoveries this week, including a big one yesterday. Um, so market might just be taking some time to kind of digest that, and also the things that we mentioned about the pattern for military conflict in Iran happening starting at the market close on Fridays. Um, it might just buyers might just not have the sort of like risk appetite for getting this up out of the weekly value, but there's a pullback there. You're back to that other imbalance. Got back above it again. Just consolidating up here, the top half of the RTH range. Could have scalped this definitely a few times off of this imbalance level, but it's just not enough. For me, it's not enough risk to reward. And I don't particularly want to be fading this right now. I lean into buyers continuing the momentum they had for the week and or the latter half of the week and yesterday, but I'm not seeing it right now. I think as much as traders don't like it, including myself, because, the whole reason that a lot of us trade is to, push buttons and hopefully make some money. But it's just as important to not touch it when it's not doing anything. And right now it is neutral candle color. It is sitting between three large imbalances. It is right at the edge of weekly value and right at the edge of um, the current day's value. So for me, it can't possibly flash any larger stop signs. So I need to see somebody decide they're going to initiate here. Have like another 12 minutes left in B period. I'm going to be really annoyed if we do another B period inside of A period like we did on my Wednesday stream. Um, but it wouldn't surprise me right now either because volume seems pretty light and directionality even lighter. All these got reactions to all of these imbalance levels. They're just too tightly clustered for my taste. Oh, there's some aggression from the sellers though. Hmm. Makes me want to consider looking at if they rebid 22 and can't hold it right back at that same imbalance level. We've started to put in a little bit of a double distribution. Um, and they got right back in front of it. Didn't get above it though. Still not ultra excited about shorts up here. I mean, that might have just been frustrated buyers who got stuck sitting in it for 30 minutes that were finally like, all right, I'm getting out of this. That's the first kind of interesting thing that's happened here. They did get it almost back up to this level, but it was there for a couple seconds, not long enough for me to look for an entry. I still think shorting is going to be harder up here, in my opinion. There's also a lot of tests of this area up here. Basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So some passive sellers sitting up there, and now you're getting a little bit of liquidation off of it. It's a decent move had we been able to catch this reoffer here, but it was there for just a couple seconds. It's going to be another rejection right at, like, they just have a lid on the edge of value for this week. And tagged the session mid there, almost to the tick. As I talked about earlier on stream, I'm interested if price can get down as low as in the 650s around this little node here. Otherwise, we're just kind of trading in the middle of today's value and in weekly value. So if I take a long trade before 650, because I'm not sure if we will get that low, then it would be probably a pretty quick scalp. And there's a buy and balance there. Probably scalpable move off the session mid. You also see that we moved the imbalance that we were going to try to maybe reoffer at, or we did reoffer at here. I just didn't have an order set there. That it moved that one from down here, so this imbalance is larger than the one that was sitting here. It's a nice little move off of that imbalance there. For multiple tests of the high, might be a bit of a running start for the buyers. Pop this. If I go back up to 4, then the one that got kicked out by this one is back on my chart. It's not a new level, it's the same one we were looking at. Just our candidate ranking system to keep charts clean. If I have, say, a max of 3, then it will show the 3 strongest levels. So if a new one shows up that can be stronger than the original top 3, then it will move, add that to the chart. So if I put 4 back on, then it shows this one that got kicked out. I just wanted a point of reference for if we come back up here. I want to look at this 872. Oh, they're basically there right now. See if we can get below it maybe. That's below it. I'm long at 72 off this imbalance level. Gonna give it 20 points. I'm gonna see if we can get this back up closer to this imbalance level. Nice little push there. If we get above 900, I'm gonna move my stop up. We're just gonna trade this imbalance to imbalance. I'm gonna put my offer. I'm gonna see how price reacts if it gets to 920. I think we got above 900 there. Yeah, we're above 900 there. I'm gonna move my stop. Just gonna risk a little bit less because I can now that we're away from this imbalance level. So stop is almost at break even, not quite. I want to keep my stop on the other side of this imbalance level. So stop is now at 66.50 while our entry is at 72. So really only risking like 6 points at this point. Getting a little stuck here at 900. I want to see how price reacts when it gets to 920. There we go. And do we get momentum through it, or are we going to reject off of it? Oh, might get a little momentum through it. All right, pulling stop up even further. We're going to go to right below where they held this little pivot right here, 82. Would love to see them retest the high here. Our stop is in profit by about 10 points. I'm going to look for a break through the high. Probably continue to trail this up. Some nice momentum. And I had mentioned a minute ago talking about running start. So just like we had these like kind of weak attempts at breaking the high, and you get a pullback and then put in a higher low and now push. It's kind of a high area of traffic though, so that's why my stop is pulled up. And failing over that imbalance level this time. Don't love that for my long. I'm just gonna hold it. I really want to see them. Like the risk to reward here for me is stop is already in profit. It'll be a really small winner if it comes back to my stop. But I think it makes sense to try to hold for new highs. Just a lot of traffic here. This is kind of the area that buyers need to get some momentum through. We've got previous day's close and the Globex open, and obviously the buy imbalances that we've seen in here as well. So, and edge of weekly value. So a lot of things up here that price could get stuck on, but since stop's already in profit, we got a pretty good entry. Fine to hold this. I'm gonna go ahead and scroll my DOM up to where I would want to be taking profit, which is like through the high. Put in another higher low there, so that's productive. If we get above this imbalance here at 47, I'll move my stop to just below 900. Lock in a few more points. Close. Okay, stop's going to go to just below 900. So we've locked in just about 30 points. And going to see, oh, might be a news. I have a feeling, I think my feed just locked. We'll give it a second and I'm going to be stopped. There's some kind of news that just dropped. Wow. And yeah, we actually got slippage on that. So that was actually a small losing trade. And that's why you have a stop in place, folks. No idea what that is. But that's going to be untouchable for a few minutes. I also think that yeah, there's not much you can do about that. That is basically instantaneous. We actually got sometimes you'll see like on moves like that, you'll see your depth of market. You'll see your depth of market kind of freeze. And that is from the exchange side. I mean, it can also be your platform hanging for all of the volume that comes in that fast, but you get velocity logic events, which basically price is moving around so fast, like there's so many orders coming in that the exchange basically briefly pauses everything to allow their computers to rematch orders. And that's why you see everything pause there for a moment. So it's not just you that can't exit, it's everyone. Small loser on my side, about 20 points. Even though our stop was in profit, there's just no liquidity on the way down. So we get filled at the best price that we can. Had we not had a stop in, um, that would have been really not good, even though we're about back to the price that I was in at before. If we get back above this level, I might just take the same trade again. The problem is it's just moving around a bit too violently for my taste. But they already took back over half this move. But that liquidity is really thin. You just see like all the holes in between. Just means price is going to move around incredibly fast. And back to the session mid. I'm filled at the same price. It's really, really, really fast right now. So I'm at 72. I'm actually going to give it 40 points. Stop is down here at 32. I want to see if we can get, we tried to get it back above that level, which is where I got filled and didn't hold, but we took back over half that drop. I want to see if buyers can continue that momentum back up. I don't love them rejecting that from the other side, though. That's better. We'll kind of do the same thing again. If they get it back above 900, stop will go closer to break even just underneath these imbalances again. Needs to go soon, though, or this spot that was support is not going to end up being resistance right at where we're along. That's better. See if they can get it back above 900. I'm looking for them to take this whole move back. That was such a snapback reaction. The market had no interest in going lower. There's a sell imbalance there. I'm actually going to add that other level back so I know kind of where my my entry was. Getting kind of a cluster of aggression right in the middle of session right now. But want to see this back above 900. Starting to take too long for my flavor. but they got it back over the 50% line for this whole down move. So a lot of times, in my opinion, when you see that, you get enough sellers underwater to get some pressure to back up to the upside. It's also the market kind of saying, at least for the moment, um, that it didn't believe or really care about whatever the news drop was. Now just kind of stuck in between these imbalances. Oh, they might come and stop me. Looks like those imbalances are going to be resistance instead of support. Haven't stopped me yet, but I'm making a pretty good run at it. Not, like I said earlier in the stream, not really interested in shorts, even with that move down. That's just like such a quick, brief news spike down that um, not really interested from the short side. So if I get stopped, I would probably look for it to get back up above these imbalance levels again and try to long one more time. But I kind of have a three trade strike rule that I try to follow. And this would be my second trade here. Back into profit here, just barely, basically sitting at break even. Need to see a little momentum above these imbalance levels, but that was another higher low. See what that held when it just basically kind of some of these tops and basically held almost that node that we talked about, but it was like it wasn't even there for a few seconds, basically, is all it was down at that level, and didn't even get deep enough. Like I would have been waiting for 650-ish to be looking to get long, so nothing really to do on that. Also, it's still like kind of looking at it being like, what the heck just happened? I'm going to time stop myself out on this here shortly, giving it like a couple more minutes. If we don't get back above these imbalances, I'll probably flatten out and reassess if it hasn't stopped me. Come on, buyers, you did all the work to get it way up off the lows. See, just needed a little bit of encouragement. I don't love that it's underneath this level. I want to see it above like that. That's better. All right, that's above 900. It's really volatile. So stop is going to go to just below where that candle was. Just reducing my risk down to like 14 points because it was a lot wider due to the volatility. Probably a decent chance that I can get stopped out here, but with that super crazy violent move down, um, I'm gonna protect myself again. So we're sitting right below this large. You can see actually the imbalance here at 62. um, right in here, but it's basically the point of control. And I'm looking for the highs again. That was what our initial trade was. Whatever the news thing that came out was, market decided it didn't care about, at least for a continuation to the downside. So um, we'll see. Otherwise, if it just keeps chopping here in the middle, like I'll end up with a small, like a small red day. I'm gonna come down and test my entry again. Up like 15-ish points right now. Nothing to like really get excited about. I will get excited if we can get this back above 900 and hold though, because I think that puts the high back in play. But right now it's just kind of stuck in the traffic of all these imbalances. Even though we didn't lose that much, I'm really annoyed we got slippage on that last trade. Um, especially when trading the micros. Um, no, they might come stop me. I mean, we only have a 14-point stop on this, and it's moving around quite a bit. So, but I'm just I'm just protecting myself from downside. You know, one price nuke stop per morning is enough for my taste. You know, when they say it's prudent to have a stop in place all the time, those are the moves that they're talking about. Um, you know, that's because you can see, like, you know, if we didn't get this recovery, like we just did, 300 points in a matter of 20 seconds. So, um, if you don't get that recovery and you are stuck in position, it is painful, painful, painful. And it's kind of crazy. I mean, my stop was actually about 20 points, about 20 points in profit, maybe 30 almost. We were long at 72 and we were stopping out right below 900. Um, and we still got 20 points of slippage. Um, pretty unfriendly. They held that imbalance or this. It's actually the point of control. It's not an imbalance here at 62. Just barely missed my stop there. And that's like I'm well aware that my stop is actually probably too close right now. Um, that is just because of we got above the night. We got a start of a push that I wanted, and um, after this after this nuke here, I think I'll live with my tighter stop. And if I end up with a small red session on Friday, then that's better than a catastrophic red session on any day, particularly Friday. I don't want to carry some big dumb loss into the weekend. And that's above 900 again. It's productive. Price just had to do a little bit of digesting there. Just keeping my stop where it is. If we get above 920, I'll choke it up just a little bit more. I want to stay with my stop on the other side of these imbalances if I can. Now we want to see these imbalances try to provide a little bit of support if price comes back like it is right now. Somebody in chat said they made $2 a day. Well, you're doing better than I am. Um, Looks like they might come get my stop here again. Kind of like, go if you're gonna go. Gonna get back above 900 again. The problem is some of these imbalances I think are starting to become a bit of price magnet. I would love for the imbalances at the top to become price magnet while we're long right now, but it seems that the middle is a lot more interesting to everything right now, and I haven't even bothered to check to see whatever news or comment created that super fun down move. Like you see some aggressive buying, they just don't want to be aggressive above 900 yet. I'm just sitting on neutral delta too. So you see the candle coloring is basically gray. Maybe I just need to turn off some of these levels so price can move. You finally gonna come get my stop? Yes. Small stop there again. I might try one more time, but honestly, there's like so much traffic here. No continuation down there, but sitting underneath this imbalance now and just rejected it. Still kind of mostly small red day, like down like 30-ish points. We were about 60 points in profit before this decided to happen, but I was chatting with my wife yesterday and she doesn't trade. She doesn't really follow markets. Whatever she follows is just having to listen to me. And she was like, I said something about taking like a small winner or something like that. She's like, well, why don't you take bigger winners? It's a good idea. Should listen to her. Getting close to my cutoff time as well. I'm like 5 minutes away from from 10 a.m. So might just be living with the small red day. Given what happened here, I'm happy that anything on the red side is small. Um, yep, and these imbalances were kind of a little bit of support while it got there, and now provided pretty good resistance there. I'll have to go see what headline is responsible for my red day. I really think that had we not had whatever that was, I think we were definitely getting ready to go break the high. That was going to be the third RTH test up there, and then you have the previous day's high. So obviously can't predict the future, but have no regrets about holding longs there. I mean, there's no way you can know that that's about to happen. So all you can do is protect yourself to the downside, which is what we did. I would like to speak with my broker though about 20 points of slippage on a single micro contract. That's uh, not ideal. And if you happen to be shorting these imbalanced levels, you were gifted 300 points on a platter. Hope you took profits fast though, because it got back up in a hurry. That move is going to mess up the rest of the session though. I mean, you're just trading inside of that move basically. And one of the reasons I'm long is that, this sold off 957, almost 300 points, and took back, you know, over half of it, 3/4 of it basically. So when that happens, you know, I think a lot of times, in my opinion, if it's going to take back 3/4 of it, the chance of it taking back the whole thing is relatively high. So I wanted to catch some of that momentum to the upside. We caught just a little piece of it. We're able to get our stop pulled up before they decided to roll it back over. But that's kind of my thesis with those, is when you have such a snapback reaction, you can get a lot of people off sides and get some pressure to the upside. But has anybody seen whatever headline caused that? I literally don't follow the news while I'm trading, but as we're getting close here, I'm curious as to who had it out to get me um, for my long there. Probably not going to be any other trades for me. I'm not really interested in um, somebody in the Discord said, I hope nobody was long. Well, I was. Fortunately, stop was in profit, so somehow still got slippage and lost a little bit of few points, but nothing catastrophic. But yeah, that's probably going to be no more trades for me. I'm going to stay on stream for just a minute. I just want to see if just to see what price does here. Uh, so one of our members put in the Discord that breaking news was that Trump said have agreed to Iran talks, but the United States has stated to them in no uncertain terms that the ceasefire is over. So, a little early in the day for war headlines. Was thinking that those might show up later in the session, not while I was long at 9:30. Looks like based on the Discord that I was not the only one who was long. Sorry, guys. Um, Hopefully everybody had stops in place. Um, couldn't have waited, couldn't have waited 5 more minutes to drop that headline, huh? But market giveth and market taketh away. I have a suspicion that this will just kind of continue to chop. You may see it drift a little bit lower as people start to de-risk. Later in the session, if they're able to get it back above 900 again, I won't be trading, but I think if you start to get back to where this move, this news headline dropped, I think you'll see shorts cover and you might get a quick pop through the high. But yeah, I don't have any real interest in shorting it. And you're really sitting basically inside of this giant news candle. So I think it gets pretty non-directional in here. The real trade there was, if you were prepared to reoffer in these imbalance levels, waiting until it popped above it and then got back below the lowest one was probably the move. But um, I'm not so apt to to be long at a certain price and then it gets way below it and comes back to it. I'm not so long to short it there again. I feel like even for me, like psychologically, like if I'm like, I'm long and then it stops me out and then I get short and then it stops me out, like it messes with my head a lot more than if I'm just like, well, let me try my long again because it got price way back. Price got 30 points above wherever we were long. So we got a decent move off of here. It's just looking for it to take back the whole thing and we didn't. So I think that's going to be it for me, guys. Small red session, nothing crazy. Going to end down to about looks like negative 32 points. So nothing nothing crazy. Just going to take the small loss into the weekend. I think it's a small green week for the days that I was trading. Hope you all have a nice weekend. We'll be streaming again next week, Wednesday and Friday. If you are interested, our Discord is free to join. Come and see what we're all about. Really appreciate you guys coming and hanging out for a bit. And we'll see you next week. Everybody enjoy the weekend.